Used after everything we've done for you? My dad sneered. I moved out completely. 4 months later, they were evicted from their home. I, 32M, grew up as the reliable, older brother in a family that never saw my value. For most of my life, I was the safety net, the backup plan, the constant source of support that everyone took for granted. It took me nearly 30 years to finally understand that I was nothing but their plan B when things went wrong. From as early as I can remember, my younger brother Jackson was the golden child. Our parents made it painfully obvious. While I got hand-me-downs and thrift store clothes, Jackson strutted around in Nike and Adidas. When I needed new school supplies, I'd hear about how money was tight, but somehow there was always enough for Jackson's gaming systems and the latest iPhone. By 16, I was working part-time after school at a local grocery store, stocking shelves and bagging groceries until closing. Not because I wanted to, because I had to. My parents made it clear that if I wanted a car, college money, or even basic necessities sometimes, I needed to contribute. Meanwhile, Jackson was encouraged to focus on being a kid and enjoy his youth. He never held a job until after college. The pattern continued into our 20s. I worked my ass off, taking out loans and working multiple jobs to put myself through state college. It took 6 years instead of 4 because I had to take semesters off when money got too tight. Jackson. He got a free ride to an expensive private university, courtesy of our parents emptying their savings and taking out Parent Plus loans. He partied, switched majors 3 times, and eventually graduated with a degree he never used. What bothered me most wasn't just the blatant favoritism. It was watching my parents' terrible financial decisions in real time. They'd take out a home equity loan to fund Jackson's semester abroad, then panic about making the payments. They'd max out credit cards for his fraternity dues, then juggle balance transfers between cards, all while telling me they were investing in his future. When I'd express concern about their mounting debt, they'd brush me off. "We know what we're doing," Dad would say. "Property values always go up," Mom would assure me as they refinanced the house for the 3rd time in 5 years. I could see the train wreck coming, but no one would listen. When our parents hit rough patches, and there were many, guess who they called? Me. The time Dad got laid off, I covered their mortgage for 4 months. When Mom needed dental surgery insurance wouldn't cover, I handed over $7,000 without hesitation. When their car broke down, I cautioned for a new one. Not once did they ask Jackson for financial help, even after he was working. "He's still finding his way," they'd say. "We don't want to burden him." I can't count how many times I heard, "Alex, you're so good with money," or "You're the responsible one," or my personal favorite, "We don't worry about you." These weren't compliments. They were justifications for treating me like an ATM while treating Jackson like their precious baby boy who needed protection and support. The inheritance conversation happened when I was 28. Grandma had passed, leaving behind a modest estate, mainly her house and some savings. My parents called me over specifically to discuss how the inheritance would be handled. They explained that while Grandma had included both Jackson and me equally in her will, they had concerns about how the money would be distributed. "We know Grandma wanted things to be fair," Mom began, "but Jackson has student loans and hasn't established himself yet." Dad nodded solemnly. "We know you'll do the right thing, Alex. You've always understood family responsibility." It didn't take a genius to understand what the right thing meant. They expected me to give my share to Jackson. When I didn't immediately agree, they seemed genuinely surprised. The conversation became tense, with subtle reminders of how family supports each other and how Jackson really needs this boost. I left without making any promises, feeling sick to my stomach. In the end, I kept my inheritance, about $45,000, and used it as a down payment fund for a future home. My parents were coldly civil about it, but relatives started making comments. Aunt Linda asked if I was having money problems that prevented me from helping my brother. Uncle Steve suggested I was being unnecessarily rigid about Grandma's intentions. It was clear my parents had been talking. Through all of this, I kept believing in family. I kept thinking my loyalty and sacrifice would eventually be recognized, appreciated, reciprocated. What a fucking joke. The breaking point came last year at Jackson's graduation dinner. After 7 years, 3 program changes, and 2 academic probations, my 27-year-old brother finally completed his master's degree. Our parents rented out a private room at an upscale steakhouse, which I partially funded after Mom called saying they were a little short this month. The financial red flags were everywhere. Dad's business had been struggling for years, with him regularly dipping into his retirement account to cover slow periods. They'd refinanced the house again just 6 months prior, this time with a significantly higher interest rate due to their declining credit scores. Mom's side hustle selling leggings in a barely disguised MLM was costing more than it brought in. Anyone paying attention could see they were one emergency away from financial collapse. I sat through 2 hours of my parents fawning over Jackson's perseverance and academic brilliance. I smiled as relatives toasted his bright future and incredible potential. I even chipped in for the $300 bottle of champagne someone ordered. Then came the gifts. My parents stood up, making a grand speech about how proud they were, how Jackson deserved something special for this accomplishment. Dad pulled out a small box with a bow on it. Inside were car keys to a brand new Audi A4. My parents had taken out a loan to buy my brother a luxury car as a graduation present. I was stunned but kept my composure. I genuinely tried to be happy for him, despite knowing I was still driving the used Honda I'd bought myself 8 years ago. That's when my mother nudged my father, who nodded and pulled out another wrapped box. "And Alex," my mother said, smiling, "we didn't forget about you, for always being so responsible and helpful." My stomach tightened as every eye in the room turned to me. I unwrapped the box, opened it, and stared in disbelief at what was inside. A set of premium cleaning supplies for my apartment. A fancy duster, organic multi-surface cleaner, microfiber cloths, and rubber gloves. "Because we know how much you like keeping your place nice," Mom explained cheerfully. "You're so organized and practical." The restaurant seemed to spin around me. 20-plus years of supporting this family, tens of thousands of dollars given freely, countless sacrifices made. And my reward was fucking cleaning supplies, while my brother got a $45,000 car. That moment crystallized everything. It wasn't just a thoughtless gift. It was a message about my worth to them. It was the clearest possible statement about where I stood in the family hierarchy. I didn't make a scene. I thanked them politely, excused myself shortly after, and drove home in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room until dawn, mentally calculating all the money I'd given my family over the years. The total made me physically ill. The next morning, I made a decision. No confrontation, no dramatic announcement. I was just done. I found a new apartment in a different neighborhood, one they weren't familiar with. I opened new bank accounts at a different bank and transferred my funds. I removed myself as cosigner from anything I legally could. I called the companies where I couldn't remove myself and explained I would no longer be responsible for payments. I changed my phone number, limited my social media, and told my workplace not to share my information. 2 weeks later, I was ready. I sat my parents down and calmly explained I was moving and needed some space. The shock on their faces would have been comical if it wasn't so infuriating. "But why?" Mom asked, genuinely confused. "Is this about the graduation gift? Were you hopping for something different?" "This isn't about the gift," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about 20 years of being used as your backup plan while Jackson gets everything." Dad's face darkened. "Used, after everything we've done for you." And that's when I finally let some truth fly. "What exactly have you done for me? Name one sacrifice you've made for me that equals what I've done for this family." Their silence was deafening. "That's what I thought," I said, standing up. "The Bank of Alex is permanently closed." The next day, I moved out completely. I blocked their numbers, limited contact with extended family who might try to guilt me, and focused on building a life where I was more than someone's safety net. For 2 months, there was silence. I used that time to advance my career, throwing myself into work with a freedom I'd never felt before. I got a substantial promotion, started therapy to unpack decades of family bullshit, and even began dating someone who valued me for me, not what I could provide. Then the text started, casual at first as if nothing had happened. "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. Dad found this article and thought of you. We miss you at Sunday dinners." I didn't respond. The messages turned more urgent as weeks passed. "Mom's not feeling well and keeps asking about you. The car's making a strange noise, could use your advice. Jackson's having trouble with his job search, thought maybe you could help." Still, I held firm. Then came the call from my aunt, Dad's sister, telling me I should really call my parents because they were having some difficulties. I thanked her but didn't elaborate. A week later, Uncle Steve showed up at my apartment unannounced. His approach was less subtle than my aunt's. Your parents are struggling, Alex. They might lose the house. I know you've got that inheritance money sitting around. Family helps family. I told him the inheritance money was gone, invested in my future as Grandma would have wanted. He left looking disgusted, but not before dropping a parting shot. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. After that, the extended family started their campaign in earnest. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly texted asking why I was holding a grudge when my parents needed all hands on deck. My mother's sister called to remind me how much my parents had sacrificed for me growing up. Even my childhood friend Ryan, whose parents were close with mine, reached out to say everyone was worried about me abandoning my family. It was as if an entire network had been activated, all with the sole purpose of getting me to open my wallet. Not one person asked if I was okay or what had led to the estrangement. The only thing that mattered was that I wasn't fulfilling my assigned role as the family ATM. Finally, after nearly 4 months of my disappearing act, my mother showed up at my workplace. I was furious, but took her to a coffee shop across the street rather than make a scene at the office. "We're in trouble, Alex," she said, her eyes red from crying. "Your father's business has been failing for months. We've fallen behind on the mortgage, and now the bank is threatening foreclosure. Jackson moved back home because he couldn't afford his apartment anymore, and now we're all struggling. We need help." This wasn't a surprise. I'd seen their financial house of cards teetering for years, making increasingly risky choices, ignoring every warning sign. The only shock was that it had taken this long to collapse. "How much?" I asked, already knowing the answer would be astronomical. "45,000 would get us caught up on everything," she said, as casually as if asking to borrow $20. "We know it's a lot, but you've always been so good with money, and we're family." There it was, the magic word, family. The same family that had drained me dry for decades and given me cleaning supplies as a thank you. "No," I said simply. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, I'm not giving you $45,000. But we'll pay you back," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "Once your father's business picks up again. Like you paid me back the $7,000 for your dental work, or the 4 months of mortgage payments, or the—" "That was different," she interrupted, color rising in her cheeks. "Those were gifts you offered to help. And now I'm declining to offer. I'm sure Jackson can help. After all, he has that nice Audi he could sell." Her expression hardened. "I can't believe how selfish you've become. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by turning your back on your family when we need you most." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low and steady. "Mom, you and Dad have been turning your back on me my entire life. The only difference is I finally stopped expecting anything different." I stood up, dropped a 10 on the table for our coffees, and walked out as she called after me. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing with texts from my father, calling me ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. For a moment, the old guilt started creeping in, but I pushed it away. That night, my entire extended family seemed to blow up my phone. Apparently, my parents had spread the word that I was letting them lose their house out of spite. Uncles, aunts, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my responsibility to family. I turned off my phone and slept better than I had in months. The next few weeks brought more desperate attempts to get me to change my mind. Jackson even showed up at my apartment, teary-eyed and still somehow making the situation about him. How hard it was living with our parents again. How stressful the financial situation was for everyone. How he might have to sell his precious car if things didn't improve. "That sounds tough," I told him. "Welcome to the real world." 3 months after my mother's ambush at my workplace, I received a substantial year-end bonus and a notification that my offer on a house had been accepted. It wasn't anything flashy, a modest 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood, but it was mine. After years of pouring money into everyone else's dreams, I was finally investing in my own. The day after I closed on the house, my cousin Megan called. She'd always been one of the more decent relatives, staying out of the family drama. She wasn't calling to guilt-trip me, just to let me know my parents had received a foreclosure notice and were scrambling to figure out their next move. Jackson had indeed sold the Audi, but for much less than they'd paid for it, and the money was already gone. "I thought you should know," she said. "Not because you need to do anything, just as information." I thanked her for the call and sat in my new, empty living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes. For a brief moment, I considered reaching out, offering some help, not the full amount, but enough to buy them some time. Then my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Heard from Megan that you bought a house. Nice to know you have money for yourself while your family faces homelessness. Real class act, Alex. And just like that, any lingering doubt evaporated. I blocked his number too. 6 months after I walked away, I've settled into my new home. I've painted the walls colors I like, bought furniture that suits me, and created a space that feels entirely mine. My career continues to thrive now that I'm not constantly diverting resources to family emergencies. The woman I've been dating has practically moved in, and for the first time in my life, I'm in a relationship that feels balanced and healthy. Meanwhile, according to Megan, my parents are moving into a small apartment after being unable to stop the foreclosure. Jackson is crashing on a friend's couch, blaming everyone but himself for his situation. They're still telling anyone who will listen that their eldest son abandoned them in their time of need. What they don't mention is how they abandoned me my entire life, not physically, but emotionally, financially, and in every way that truly matters. They don't talk about the decades of unequal treatment, the thousands of dollars taken with empty promises, the constant expectation that I would sacrifice while they spoiled Jackson. Yesterday, I received a letter in the mail, no return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting. Inside was a greeting card with a simple message. We're still your family, no matter what. When you're ready to make amends, we'll be waiting. I laughed out loud in my kitchen, the sound echoing in the home I bought myself, with the money I saved myself after finally putting myself first. The truly sad part? They still don't get it. They still think I'm the one who needs to make amends. They'll never understand that family isn't just a word you throw around when you need something. It's not a one-way street where one person gives and gives while others take and take. Family is supposed to be reciprocal. It's supposed to be balanced. It's supposed to be loving. What we had wasn't family, it was parasitic. I tore up the card and threw it away, feeling nothing but a calm certainty that I'd made the right choice. The Bank of Alex didn't just close. It went out of business permanently. And for the first time in my life, I'm completely okay with that.